I've actually seen this situation a couple of times. Parents will not sign up with a college recruiting company and they're like, we'll just do it ourselves. We'll put our time into it and we'll save more in the end. But actually, in the end, they end up spending thousands more than what they would have paid for the recruiting company because they were chasing all these ID camps and traveling across the country to schools that weren't a fit when the company could have assessed them and told them, hey, you should go to these, save your money, they'll want you. And I've seen that situation many times where in the end, way more money was spent chasing the wrong schools.
I'm glad you brought it up and not me. And by the way, Erica and I do not work together financially. We don't have a connection financially. There's nothing, no reason for her to say any of these things.
No kickbacks,
Uh,
nothing. We just hop on podcasts
no,
and talk.
we're just trying to help. But that's exactly right. I had a girl from Canada who was going to go to the Yale camp. It was going to be mom and dad traveling. They were going to make a weekend of it, the whole thing, going to visit the campus and the town and all that. And they were coming from Canada, a little long ways away. It would have been a $2,000 trip. We were able to get on the phone, call Yale. Do you need a goalkeeper for this year? The answer was no. We just signed a girl. Get back to the family, say, don't go to the camp. They've already got their goalkeeper. You're wasting your time. They save themselves our fee plus just not going to camps. So it's more than just, I think if this is done right, it's more than just exposure. I almost don't like that word exposure, at least the way it's being used. Get exposure, get exposure, get exposure to who, why, when, where is the important, ask the questions. Why am I doing this? What are the odds? What am I trying to do here? I always liken it to like movie stars. And if anybody's old enough to in our audience to remember the story about, I think it's Lana Turner and Schwab's drugstore, where she came to California, was sitting in Schwab's drugstore. Somebody saw her, said, "You're gorgeous. You should be in movies." They put her in movies. She got discovered. And I often feel like that's the approach that parents are taking with ID camps. If you just Google it, I don't even know what will come up, but I bet a big number comes up. How many players attended the Stanford camp last year? It goes into the literally the thousands, 1,000, 2,000, something like that. And so you're showing up with these masses, and if you don't stand out, you don't get noticed and picked up, then why are you there? If you're there for the learning, if they're teaching you new things about soccer, if they're teaching you about the college recruiting space, if you're learning something, if there's a value to it, if your family was going to be in California anyways, and you thought, well, this will be fun to make part of our vacation, going to the Stanford camp for the week or whatever. If there's a reason for it that has nothing to do with necessarily trying to be discovered, probably if that's where you want to spend your money, nothing wrong with that. Spend your money how you want to spend your money. Let your kid experience whatever you want your kid to experience. But to go into it with the idea that I'm spending this money as an investment to get my kid discovered amongst these thousands and thousands, and be honest, if your kid's not the best kid on their team. I see teams of 3, 4, 5 players going to the Stanford camp. I see whole teams going to the Stanford camp. We're all going to get discovered at the Stanford, as if Stanford was going to pick up 15 players from one team. It's never going to happen. It's not how it works. It's not reality. I mean, no part of that has a basis in the reality of how the economics and a scarcity model and how this works in the world or anything that I know of.
There's always a cost benefit analysis, and everyone needs to be really diligent about that. And I love that story you just said about the girl potentially going to the Yale camp. And I think any parent listening would be like, dang, I wish someone would save me from spending 2K. And I think those are some important questions parents can ask before they go to camps. Well, do they need my kid's position? Do they meet the academic requirements? And just so many questions instead of just going for the sake of exposure when they probably don't even need you. Are there any other questions before choosing an ID camp parents should be asking?
Well, number one is, can my kid play at this level? Which means that you and your child have watched multiple games at that level, preferably in person. There's something about I'm watching. I'm a Warriors fan. Been watching the NBA playoffs here going on. I watch these guys play. And by the way, on television, LeBron doesn't look that big on television. He doesn't. It all doesn't look that fast on television. I've been to Warriors games in person, and I stood on the floor and watched them warm up. It's like, holy smokes, are these guys athletic? This is scary that somebody of LeBron's size and strength should be able to move like he does, or Kevon Looney, or some of these guys that are just absolute physical phenomenons, uh, freaks of nature almost, that somebody that big, that heavy, that strong should move that fast is mind blowing to me. You can only appreciate that in person. You can't really appreciate that on film. And we're streaming on our computers and we're watching games, and it's great, but you need to see the product. And then you need to be honest and say, am I that fast? Am I that strong? Or how many years do I think I'm away from being that fast and that strong if I'm on pace? If somebody like Erica Sutter tells me, look, you're on pace with some at this age to be able to keep up with anybody in the country. You're on pace. It doesn't mean you can stop working because you're not there yet. How many years am I away from that, Erica? I don't know, hard to tell, but probably 2 or 3 years. You may not hit your peak until whatever. Knowing that that means you're probably sitting the bench till whenever. Now, there's another one of our tick boxes. What's important to me? Is it important to play and be a starter immediately? Is it important for me to be coming off the bench immediately? Is it important for me to be at least traveling with the team immediately to make the travel squad? And then you'd go right down the list. Or am I willing to sacrifice? I have a girl that went to Colorado, name's Kellis Johnson. Her story's not really a secret. She coaches at Dominican University in California. And she wanted to be at Colorado no matter what. She wanted to be a Buffalo no matter what. That's what she wanted. She was going to go to school there with or without soccer. So fortunately, I was able to call Bill Hempen, and Bill was the coach there at the time, and she was his fourth string goalkeeper and always was. But she was at her dream school. So for the most part, she was happy with it. She accepted her role within the team. By the way, that's okay too, if that's what your kid is suited for and wants. My son, myself, would have crushed us both to know that we were never going to play. And frankly, crushed me a game that I didn't play in. I had to play. I had to play. I was fortunate enough to never sit the bench in my life. But that's only because I was wise with my choices. I knew that if I went to certain levels, I was not going to play. I could watch them play and go, I can't do what that person does. And when it got to a certain point in my career where I looked over and said, yeah, that guy's really good, better than me, then it was time for me to step out of that situation. I'm not saying for players just to give up and quit, but you can see at a certain point when you've been working, you and I talked about this in the podcast, you can work your butt off and do everything you're supposed to do. You can get all the right sleep. You can get all the right nutrition. You can do all the right workouts. You can work your butt off. You can join all the right teams. You can do everything perfect in managing your career, work on all your mentality, and you get to a certain point where you look over and you go, yeah, that guy's good. That guy's good. I've worked so hard for so long, and I can see I'm getting to the point where I'm peaking. I'm peaking. And I'm not even remotely close to keeping up with that guy. Right? I could have worked out every single day of my life, and I'll never beat LeBron James in basketball, ever. At what point do you help your kid as a parent accept that reality? You've got to be very open-minded and not blinded by your love for your child so much that you can't see what is really happening in front of you, which does happen with parents, and it's easy to have happen. And it's easy for coaches, by the way, club coaches, to love their kids so much and get so attached to that kid that you can't see the weaknesses of that player. Almost every coach I ever talked to whether I was coaching in junior college and trying to move a kid on, or whether it was a 4-year school and the kid wasn't a fit for our program and another coach was calling me about the player, or whether it's this job now, we'll ask, so what are the player's weaknesses? What do they need to work on? And if you don't have any weaknesses as an answer, they know that something's up. It puts up their antenna, which is why they ask that question, right? So knowing what our kids' weaknesses are, and players especially knowing what your strengths and weaknesses are, and knowing where you fit and having that priority check